Stephen from Hector's House, and today is World Suicide Prevention Day. The theme for World Suicide Prevention Day this year is changing the narrative. Something we think is really important with Hector's House is not just to tell people that they should be having conversations that are difficult or uncomfortable, but to actually have them and show you what it looks like and what it sounds like and how it feels when people have those conversations. So we've got Rob and Belinda with us, and we've got Susan with us. I'll let you guys tell your own stories, but Rob and Belinda are the founders of the charity. Susan works for us as well. They all have experience of suicide bereavement, which is the primary thing we're going to be talking about today. So Rob and Belinda, if I can just get you to talk a little bit about Hector, how old he was, the sort of person he was, and what your kind of understanding was of his mental health at the time.
Hector always gave the appearance of being very happy-go-lucky. He was a musician. He was always quite a deep child, even when he was very, very young. He had a very good sort of well-developed sense of justice, I suppose you'd call it. He was a very popular boy. He was always the life and soul of the party, etc., which is often something I think you see in people who have this problem. He rarely showed any signs of depression as such. Sometimes he'd get a bit angry, that sort of thing. But he was just generally a great kid.
He was 18 when he took his life. I think that's a difficult period for young lads. There's various transitions going on, and Hector was going through a period of transition. Some of his mates were going off to university. He hadn't quite done the work that was needed in order for him to go where he was going to go to. And I think there was vulnerability there. He'd also broken his leg and various other things, wasn't able to pass his driving test, which he found frustrating. And I think one of the things that, although he didn't have outward signs of depression as far as we were concerned, and though we look at through a different lens now, he was an overthinker. He thought too much. He thought a lot, and he hadn't. Well, can you think too much? I think it's just knowing that sometimes we need to understand about when we're thinking, and then you get yourself into that cycle of not feeling enough, and then and then everyone else is moving on and you're not, and I think he struggled with that.
And I think he had a bit of an overdeveloped empathy, if you like. Right from a child, he showed that very deep empathy with anything, animals, people. He would feel sorry for people. He would take that on board himself, which, yes, you can do it. And we learn as we're older to be empathetic, but not to allow it to eat us up. And I think with Hector, it ate him up.
Yeah.
If you know what I mean.
And I think, sometimes you can do that as a distraction from dealing with your own issues.
Yeah.
It's easier to do that than it is to actually then say, well, this is what I need. And I think, we perhaps didn't understand as much as we do now about how he was feeling at the time.
Thank you. And then, Susan, if I can just ask the same sort of things about Richard. So how old was he? What kind of person was he? What was your sort of understanding of his mental health at the time?
Okay, Richard, my son, was 24 years old, very intelligent. That was very obvious from when he was really young. Very gifted in lots of different areas, taught himself the guitar, was an artist, read books on philosophy. His passions were Man United and Formula One. But he was very lively when he was young, very sporty, played football and tennis for Tring, up to about the age of 12. Incredibly funny. His sense of humour was very dry and quite dark, but he was very quick and witty. So he's very different to Hector in that with his mental health issues, they did kick in when he was about 11, 12 in that transition to secondary school. He was diagnosed with Asperger's syndrome, which is now called high functioning autism, when he was 20. But during that time, from about the age of 11 to then, it just went under the radar, basically. I think because he never caused any problems in school. He was very quiet and studious, he just started withdrawing into himself, very much so, and sort of pulled away from his friendships, became quite depressed. So about the age of 12, 13, he was then onto the GP and mental health services, tried on, different medication, didn't really help, had CBT, didn't really help. And then, during his teens, he was very much talking about suicide as his sort of escape, his way out. And that was something that we just lived with. He would talk about it with me specifically. And it just became more and more isolated. Left school when he was 17, halfway through his A-levels. And it was just very, very difficult to live like that. As I say, he was diagnosed privately with autism, and then we had to get him back into the system, if you like. So 3 different psychiatrists then agreed with that diagnosis, and it was all too late in a way. Richard wasn't willing to engage with anyone at that point. He did carry on trying to take medication, but it wasn't really doing anything for him. Didn't really want to engage in therapy. So it was very difficult. It was all very difficult. And then he tried to take his life, ended up being sectioned, and they didn't know how to work with him, how to look after him, how to support him, because they didn't know anything about autism. It was ridiculous. And then when he came out, he had to attend like a daily unit at Watford General Hospital. And then after about, I think it was 4 weeks, he was discharged, and but he was still talking about suicide. He was still saying, I'm suicidal, that's what I'm thinking about, but he was still discharged. And 2 or 3 weeks later, that was it. He took his life. And even though there had been that knowledge of his mental health and how bad it was, the shock and the trauma that came from actually losing him, as you know, Belinda and Rob, is just horrific. But yeah, that was basically, what happened.
Thank you. Yeah, I think, like you were saying, it's the understanding of things like autism stuff is improving all the time, but there is always work to be done, and things can always be better. So the hope is obviously just that as time goes on, less and less people are able to slip through those same cracks. But if I can just ask you guys, what were the sort of initial reactions from the people around you? So friends, family, colleagues, people that you sort of know, but them in passing. What was the sort of community reaction to what happened?
I think for us, we were very much in the community at the time. We were living at dog rescue, where Hector actually took his own life. So we were in the thick of it straight away, and there were 2 things we could have done. We could either run away, or we stay and we face it out, which is what we did. So our community is Tring. I found people's reactions very, very interesting now with hindsight. At the time, you were just like, oh my God, because you feel like you're walking through Tesco's naked. It's a real, it rips you down to nothing. So from there, you have to begin to rebuild your life. And there are certain people who I have had or considered to be my friends, who just couldn't cope with it. They just walked away. You would actually physically see them cross the street rather than have to speak to the bereaved, which is a horrible feeling because it's almost a little bit like, you're ringing a bell and saying, stay away. Other people, their reactions really shocked me, because people who, prior to this, perhaps I hadn't had much time for, or hadn't got to know, or whatever, would just come up to you in the street and hug you. One friend who just, whenever she saw me, she would never say anything. She'd just say no words and hug me. And that makes a huge, huge difference to you. You don't realise how much that tiny little bit of support at that time, how important it is. So we were lucky that we were within our community. But there are some people who just were, there's got to be a story behind it. There's got to be a reason why it happened, la-di-da-di-da. And people are judging you. And you know that, So our way of dealing with it was just to say to ourselves, no, we can't let Hector's life go to waste, because Hector really was such a massive influence on so many people, and knew so many people, and had supported, we found out afterwards, so many people. I mean, obviously they take your telephone away when someone takes their own life, because they want to check what's been going on. And we found that he was talking to people all through the night. He was supporting people and that sort of thing. So it was, I'm going off piste a bit, aren't I here? But
okay.
Generally reactions were very, very varied, and I'm sure Susan will probably say a similar thing.
I very much found the same thing as you, in that people would physically cross the street in front of me when they saw me coming, because they just didn't know how to offer support, I'm guessing, because it was a suicide, and it was such a taboo thing. It was just like, it was so rare, really. People didn't know how to handle it, and like Belinda, there were certain close friends of mine who were brilliant and were my rock, but it was very difficult. And what you were saying about walking around Tesco and it feels like you're naked, it did completely. You feel so sort of vulnerable, and almost like people are like looking at you, and it's really, really difficult. And in fact, what I did was I did run away. I ran away from Tring because I couldn't deal with it. So moved away for probably a couple of years and then came back.
Thank you for sharing that.
That's totally understandable. We did make small changes in that if we wanted to go shopping and we needed a break, we'd go to Wendover or somewhere. So we need to do things to give ourselves a break, to actually have that moment where we could just be us without assuming that people were looking at us, even if they weren't. It's that you just felt that. And the reality is, and again, we all now look at these things with different lenses because of the work we all do. And part of what we do is to try and break stigma around it, in even talking about it. But in the bereavement by suicide, for those of us bereaved by suicide, there are questions there for us and for other people. So it does mean that it is unique, and I think it is very, very painful for everybody connected to that person. And sometimes that can be people that we don't even know, because there can be that person have connected or can connect people that we don't even know that they're close friends. It could be someone at school or in the community who just had a connection with either Richard or Hector, and it can affect them, and they're left with those questions. So it's a really hard place to be for everybody when someone takes their life.
I don't want to sort of talk about myself in this, but that is something I can sort of agree with, because of knowing Hector, and he was the first person I knew who'd made an attempt on his life. And since then, there's been other people in my life who have died by suicide or have attempted suicide. But for it to be the first one, the first time it happened, it does really bring something home to you. Because prior to that, suicide is something that you see with sort of pop culture figures, or you see it in film and TV, or it's in a story, but it's not in your actual life. And then when it suddenly is, the confrontation of it is a big thing to try and understand and to sort of try and get your head around. On that kind of topic as well, something I wanted to ask about was, what things did people say and do when they were trying to help that really weren't helpful? You know, when people just sort of counterproductively try and say something where you're like, no, actually, that's pretty much the worst thing you could have said in this situation.
People that say, oh, what a selfish thing to do. I think that was, we had a couple of those, didn't we? And luckily I didn't take the bait, because you do feel angry. I mean, obviously you can't not feel angry. But there were people that said things like that. Well, how selfish, you know. What they don't seem to actually understand is that person was in pain, and that's why they did it, you know. So that was a remark that didn't go down terribly well.
Yeah, I got the, oh, I'm so angry with him. And this was like family members or, you know, close friends. I'm so angry with him, he's so selfish. And it's just like, no, you can't say that. He was in so much pain.
I think, and people, it's like with it, in any bereavement, you know, that you get an awful lot of attention for a very short period of time, and everyone gets on with their lives. And of course, people expect those bereaved to get on with their lives, and then they'll say things like, you know, it becomes, everything they say becomes trite, because nothing is normal for you for such a long time.
It's always different. You never. It's always Absolutely. Your life is radically changed. You know.
So every conversation can be really difficult and really painful, where someone says something, you know, and you know, as if you should be moving on and getting on with your lives and things. So, to be honest, it's not their fault. It's just people not realizing how difficult it is if you're bereaved, and you know. It particularly bereaved by suicide, but you know, it's when it's a child, you know. So because there isn't the normal thing when it's your parents, you can sort of reconcile that, but there are so many different things. And also when you have other siblings, and at the moment that you're trying to concentrate on the loss of one sibling, then people say, well, you've got two other children and things. And I had even that statement, and of course I love all my children. But at that moment, one was trying to concentrate on the grief that we're going through. So it isn't, I have a lot of compassion for anyone who hasn't been through something so bad that it was what you were saying. In the end, you know, people brought us food, or they gave you a hug, or they didn't say anything, and they just showed that they cared. Because if they open their mouths, and in actual fact, it's not their fault, they could get it wrong. I have people that I know cared about me who'd still get it wrong. It wasn't their fault, actually.
No, and I don't think we ever felt any anger towards them. I think we just accepted that that's how it was.
I don't know. I think now we're looking back, we do, but I think probably at the time we might have been a bit pissed off.
I think you.
Oh, you're better than me.
Yeah, maybe I'm more. I don't know.
Well balanced.
No, I don't think I'm at all balanced. But some people just, you know, some people are so amazing. I mean, that Irish lady that's a nurse, I mean, she just rocked up on the doorstep with a casserole, you know. She said, I haven't got anything to say. My kids are a similar age, but can I give you this? I mean, that is such, it just really, even now it makes me go, oh, that was such an amazingly lovely thing to do. You know, but having said that, the first time I went out with my sister, about two weeks after it had happened, I went to the garden centre, and I was wearing dark glasses. I don't know if we wear dark glasses, but you know, the eyes were a bit puffy. And this woman came up to me who actually had a dog from dog rescue, and she came up and she started yapping on about her dog, and I couldn't handle it at the time. You know, I wasn't working. I didn't work for 2 weeks. I went back to work after that, but I just turned away, and she rang my work and said that I had been rude to her. And that really hurt. That really wasn't nice, you know. So things like that. But generally, most people were lovely. I have to say, we were blessed really with so many good people who just came and were with us.
And, yeah, I mean, people are extraordinary. I mean, we often say this about in the work that we do. The support that we get at Hector's House, the support we get from people. There is a lot of kindness in the world, but we don't often see that. I learnt that somebody who was affected by Hector's death, the dad, went and became a Samaritan. I mean, that sort of thing. You sort of think, well, what can you say? That's the most beautiful thing that someone could do. Do you know what I mean? So, yeah, it's really it's difficult.
You sort of inadvertently you sort of stepped over to the next thing I was going to ask. So I'm going to sort of ask it anyway, but I'm just going to aim it at Susan this time round. Because what I was going to ask was, what are some of the ways that people sort of came through for you in kind of unexpected ways, whether it was unexpected ways or unexpected people? Just what are those things that you look back on and you remember and think, oh, it was amazing that person did that thing?
I think people just treating you normally almost was helpful, that you're still a person, you're still trying to live your life. And I always said I didn't want to be defined by it, but do you know what? I think you just are. And you, in the way you sort of accept that actually it was such a huge thing that happens in your life and destroys it basically, and you have to try and find the pieces to put back together somehow. Just to be able to go out and just have a laugh or just try and be distracted from it, the grief. That was helpful. It's difficult for me to pick out certain, events because I've lost it. I've lost, it's just a blank. A lot of probably the first few years, I don't remember much of what happened, to be perfectly honest. I've just blanked.
Yeah.
I think what you were saying about the expectation to move forward with your life is just not helpful at all. It's like you've almost had like an amputation. You miss a part of yourself, and to be able to move forward in the same way in your life is impossible. So you have to find another way, and that takes time.
Where did you look for support, and did you look for support? Like, or when did you begin that process, and where did you look, and what did you find, and what was actually useful and what wasn't?
I was offered no support at all by anybody. It didn't happen in my house. He took his life at his father's house, so the police had gone there. But the police didn't even visit me, even though I was his primary carer. There was just nothing. No support for me, no support for his siblings. So after about 6 months, I think, after I was sort of starting to come out of the shock, I reached out to Cruz myself, and they said, we'll try and organise some support for you. I can't even remember how long it took, but when I started with Cruz, they had counsellors then rather than they got befrienders now. I was seeing a counsellor, and that's probably what saved my life, to be honest. Just to understand that I wasn't going mad, I wasn't losing my mind, and this was what I was experiencing was, understandable and normal in the circumstances. So I was in therapy for 2.5 years with her, and but I had to go looking for her myself.
What year was this? Sorry, how far back is this?
Yes, so Rich took his life in 2013.
13,
So
right.
it was 11 years ago.
Yeah. Yeah.
So things are different now, much,
Yeah.
I believe. So yeah, there just wasn't anyone then. Wasn't even any sort of support groups were not up and running at that point.
Did you say Cruise, was that the organisation that you went through, or is that something that still exists now?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Rob and Belinda, just same question. You know, where did you find support? When did you begin looking? What did you find was missing in that kind of space?
Official support as such.
No, actually, not even official support. Just in general, where did you, as a person, look for support in this time?
I had a lot of support from Hector's friends, actually. The young people, massive amount. The fact that they were so shocked and traumatized in a way was actually good for me, because I didn't realize it at the time, but I was comforting them. And it was a couple of years ago, one of the guys said to me, when it happened, we all came to you as a figure, and you were that support. You were the one that hugged us. But in actual fact, I felt that they were doing that to me or for me. So I was very, very lucky because Hector was such a massive figure, because he was so important to all of these different kids. They all wrote songs about him. They were all musicians. So, you know, you've got these lovely little songs written and stuff like that, poems. They were all very, very arty kids. They drew him. I've got some lovely pictures drawn by them. And so I felt supported by them. I felt uplifted by them. I still keep in touch with a lot of them now. They've all got babies and they're growing up, you know, and it's bittersweet, but it's lovely for me to see them moving forward with their lives. I feel really, really honoured that they took me under their wing, you know. But we did have some support. We were lucky, weren't we? We had some support from the doctors, didn't we? We had a few sessions with a therapist. We opted to have our sessions together because, you know, it had happened to us both, and we felt that we could share it with each other. It wasn't, you know, that we wanted to talk separately. I also had a lovely visit from Vicar, which was really, really touching. He just rocked up one day and said, "Hello, I've come for a cup of tea." I mean, we're not big churchgoers, but he conducted Hector's funeral, and he was a lovely. Ooh, I've got a tear running down my face. Excuse me. And yeah, that was lovely. I mean, to actually have that support from him, and he was amazing at Hector's funeral and stuff, wasn't he? Just a big, bold chap, wasn't he? Really great. But apart from that, no, nothing. You had to really, well, we almost created it ourselves as Hector's house, you know, because we felt we didn't want, as you said, Susan, I will not be defined by this. I will not be that woman that everybody avoids and says is a miserable cow and is never going to smile again, because that isn't how we are. So that's kind of what we did.
Yeah, I mean, there was a slight criticism of the fact that all of these young people came to our house for about 2 or 3 weeks, and it was like a continual party.
Wonderful.
But it, as Belinda describes,
it
meant we had quite a lot of things to do for a period of time.
Yeah.
We did get counselling from the GP because I felt we needed it. In 2011, because it's only 2 years before Richard died, that, you know, there was no helpers at hand, there were no liaison officers, and all the work that we all do now to say what we needed. So lots of bereaved parents have been filtering that through to say what is needed. And I knew I needed to do something. So I found myself on child bereavement groups, and I felt a sham. I didn't feel I was in the right place, because people were talking about their young people that had died by cancer, leukemia, and I felt, because Hector had taken his own life, I felt I was in the wrong place. So I came off those, and then I read an article in one of the papers by Claire Milford Haven about her son, and wrote to her and said, "Can I help with anything in terms of, you know, what her charity was doing?" And then she asked me to go up to meet them at the Lancer Suicide Charities Task. So I met, mostly they were bereaved parents. So we had people from Samaritans and various other charities were there. And so I sat on with tasks and found purpose. And that's when we started all of this, because with that, and I met through Claire, Jane Powell, who started Calm, which was very tiny in those days. And then we started raising money for Calm. And so my way of dealing with it was to find purpose, which then created, Hector's House was just a signposting page, because part of what happened, people either ran away from us or they came and told us all their problems. And I had no experience of listening to anyone talking about their problems, or had no idea how to tell them about depression and things, but they thought we were experts because Hector had died by suicide. And so I set up a page and found Papyrus and Calm and things like that, say to people if they came to me, here's some sites. So that's, I suppose, that's what came out of all of this. But it's the same with Susan. There was very little there. No one, I don't think people were comfortable even in the GP surgery to talk about it. And there was no support. Whereas now we have Helpers at Hand, we have all of the different support groups that we can thankfully signpost people towards as well.
A huge part of what we do is post-vention support. So people who have been bereaved by a suicide in whatever relation that is, we're one of the many organisations that now exists that can step in and help that person. We act as sort of a middleman to get that person the support that's going to be best for them, and to help them through that process, and to give them those options, and to do some hand-holding there, sometimes quite literally. So it's great that we sort of provide that now, and it's something that was missing. During this kind of process, you guys all have other children. So how did you go about, supporting a child who's lost their sibling?
Johnny went off the rails, didn't he? John, our middle son, disappeared for a year, which was really worrying, because he just had a child and he just totally went off the rails. So that was very, very difficult to deal with that at the same time. Lottie, our other daughter, threw herself into Hector's House and was in fact involved with Hector's House for quite some time. But I feel she was so heavily involved that she almost burned herself out.
At the time, though, she was working on The Voice and doing other things. So
she was working. She kept it together, didn't she?
Yeah, she was amazing, and she worked hard and carried on
and really popularised and did an awful lot.
But I think
beginnings of Hector's.
I think this is so difficult because, and so I'm talking from some of the stuff I know rather than as parents, because we were probably, if you asked them, I'd probably find that I wasn't able to give them the support that they probably needed.
You didn't feel present.
And I do know that a lot of the attention is often on the parents, and that siblings get left behind. They get left, and probably we weren't going to be the right support for them, and because we were dealing with everything we did. So from my point of view, I would imagine that I was probably not the best person for them. And I was probably not providing the support I should have been doing because I was going through that. I can't talk for you, but I would, and I know that siblings. I know that the people, and that there's some work done on it, and there's a book about siblings and how they feel that they're not hurt and that they're lost in this. And I would imagine that could be true, certainly from my point of view, actually.
Susan, you have a daughter, don't you?
I have two other sons and daughter.
Right.
So the eldest son, he'd been travelling, was on a gap year, and he just sort of then got his own plan, and I think he just compartmentalised, basically. Doesn't really talk about him even now, even though they were incredibly close growing up. My youngest son, he got very depressed to the point where I was becoming quite worried about him. We managed to work through that, and he's okay now, and he's good. He will talk about Richard, and he's quite in touch with his feelings. My daughter, she really struggled. She was struggling with ME at the time. She still has that, and she'd only just gone back to college to do her GCSEs, and so when it happened, it was just before she took her exams, and she was given no leeway whatsoever by the college, so she had to sort of struggle through that. And you know, it's so difficult because you're trying to manage your own emotions somehow and dealing with the shock and the trauma, and it's very hard to be present for everyone else as well. What's happened, excuse me, is my daughter went into therapy last year, and she had EMDR, which helps with trauma, and that has helped an awful lot. But there was just nothing offered, no support offered or anything. So it was very much, I was single parent, and just trying to manage everyone's feelings and make sure I was there for everyone while I was also,
and to live your everyday life, to pay the bills and do the jobs and
Absolutely.
make sure everyone's got what they needed. It's overwhelming. It's absolutely overwhelming, isn't it? I think that's the issue, and there's very little space for when that person who you've lost is that central figure that you've got to make everything else work around it. It's very hard, very, very hard.
And I think that's the difficulty. So the siblings will feel sidelined, less than. They're not the central figure. The person who's died is the central figure. And I think from a Hector's House point of view, where we can, that's where on the postvention side we will offer support to everybody within the family and things, and wider for support. I'm very keen on that, because to ensure that siblings and all family members, if they would like it, are offered support and will take it, because one can't expect the parents to be able to be parents at that point. I think it's too much.
You just haven't got space in your head, have you? That's the thing. That's what makes it so hard. And Johnny disappearing, I mean, in some ways, although it was hard because obviously we were worried about him, it almost gave you a break, that you almost said, I can't worry about him as well, And in fact, he has coped well. He went through that year of difficulties, didn't he? And then he pulled himself together and said, right, that's it. And he's doing brilliantly now. But he talks about Hector a lot. He still talks about him a lot. And I like that. I like that he can talk about him to us. It's quite important, I think.
Yeah. And I think, that's one of the difficulties, I don't think John would mind me saying it, is that his last interaction with Hector wasn't the most helpful, or he wasn't the most, it wasn't the best thing he could have said.
They had an argument.
They had an argument, and therefore I think there's quite a lot there, and that can often be the case. So he talks about that.
I think it's important to address all these kinds of things, because I think any time that you're either supporting someone or you're dealing with such an enormous loss, you don't only have those compassionate, empathetic feelings. There'll be times when you're pissed off, you're frustrated, you're just kind of deflated. You go through all those stages, and then you have that thing of feeling guilty for feeling angry, or you feel guilty because you didn't make the time to listen to that person, or you feel guilty because you forgot about this thing and because you're not handling it perfectly. Because there is no perfect way to handle it. But I think the expectation is always that you're doing an even worse job than you think you are, because you're also having these conflicting feelings. And I think it's really important to realize that everyone has these feelings. I had a conversation with someone recently at a Hector's House thing who'd been caring for this person had been caring for their partner for over 30 years. But part of that is this huge level of them just being so frustrated at being at the beck and call of this person at all times, and then feeling incredibly guilty for being frustrated, and realizing if they talk to another carer who's providing a similar level of care for someone, they're going to say the same thing. And it's okay to be frustrated by these different feelings and these different processes. It's not just you that has these feelings, it's, and I think talking about them and realizing that and going, like Susan said earlier, realizing if you're not going mad, it's just these are complicated times and these are complicated feelings, and you won't be one thing all the time. So it's very important to know that and to realize that. And I think only through talking to people do you kind of figure that stuff out. Do you remember sort of having a watershed moment? Was there a sort of thing that happened where you were suddenly aware that you were going to be able to kind of carry on through this and to move forward with your life? Obviously, you're still always going to carry this with you, but did you ever have a sort of moment where something clicked and you realized like this is the first step on the right path to kind of moving forward?
I did.
Okay.
And it was only last year.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So the 10-year anniversary for me was the watershed, and I don't know why. Can't explain why it happened, but suddenly I felt, you know what? I am managing this. I can see a life ahead. But it's taken me that long. Yeah. Where I just didn't know if I would get through it.
2 days after Hector died.
Wow.
So for me, it was almost like a vision, a dream, whatever. And he said, "It's okay, Mum, you can move forward." So I did right from then onwards. So for me, I felt with Hector's death that it was like this big diamond that you had to keep turning it. You had to explore every single facet until you had explored the entire thing. And it's weird because I was very much that I wasn't going to go to a group for bereavement, or I wasn't going to do any of these things. I was going to do it my way. And my way for me was this exploration of how things work and how suicide works and that sort of thing. The one thing I did have, sounds really strange, I've got this purple rug, right, which is just a furry rug. And I allowed myself, when I put that rug over me, to actually forget everything. And it was almost like this cathartic thing that you just put it over you. And I would wrap myself up in it, or I have it on the bed still sometimes, don't I? And that would allow me to switch off. And I think for me, that was my almost saving grace, the fact that I could do that. Even if it was just 20 minutes, I would say, "This, I'm putting my rug on me now. I'm not going to be, work for me." So I know with Hector that he wanted us to move forward. He didn't want us to just stagnate and be sad and, so to honour his memory, for me, I felt I needed to move forward straight away. So, that was how I dealt with it. Robert dealt with it in a completely different way, didn't you?
Mm.
Yeah.
And that's very true, because you did say we're not going to be defined by this, same as Susan. And, for example, the first Christmas, Belinda said, right, he loved Christmas, we're having everybody round, we're having a big Christmas. We're not going to say...
14 people around the table, full on,
You have always done that. I think also one of your saving graces is that you can sleep. And Belinda she's very lucky in that she can go bang, go sleep and do that. And I think that is helpful.
Yeah.
I don't think, 18 months after Hecky died, I then didn't know, but I found the doctor was seeing me about something else, that I actually was depressed. So I went on to antidepressants. I didn't know I was, but I obviously was. And I don't think you do know necessarily that you are. And now know through what we do that I had lost hope, etc. Did I ever have a watershed moment? No, I think I just gradually kept on doing stuff. I knew there was a difference between when I first went back to work, that if I went into a client meeting, doing other things. It took so much energy. I mean, I remember leaving a client's office and standing there lifting in tears because just doing my normal job meant I was exhausted. I was probably horrible to work with. So maybe other people would say that it changed. In terms of my view, no, I didn't have a watershed moment, actually. I just carried on. Of course, there were times when it will have been less painful and less heavy. I always describe it as a heaviness. But I can't tell you now whether that was suddenly shed. And it isn't, because I can still burst into tears and I still find things really heavy and I still find times. So, yeah, I don't know. So for me, I don't have a definite point.
Both of those things are perfectly valid, whether it's a brick by brick, step by step process, or whether it's a thing of, and like Susan said, there was no definitive thing to a T where you're like, oh, it was the day that I, picked up this one book and it suddenly happened. But you had that moment of knowing that on a day something within you had changed. And I think both things are valid, and some people will experience one thing and some people will experience the other. I think it's very interesting that between the three of you have different perspectives on that too.
So as people, we deal with things in such different ways. Robert is very much a doer. Aren't you? He's a doer. He'll go, right, I'm going to do this, I'm going to sort this out. He's really organised. I'm not. I'm more of a person. So my way of dealing it was in my head, more in my head. Whereas with Robert, it was more, I'm going to physically do something about this. And that's what he's done. It's amazing, really, that Hector's house has grown.
Is there a specific piece of advice or a specific piece of knowledge to do with the kind of grief process that if you'd have known years ago it would have been really helpful? Or do you think it's a case of you just kind of stumble through these things and you find the relevant points as they come along? If there's one thing you could, because obviously we are all involved in supporting other people through this process, what are the things that you like to kind of start with because for you they were the most useful things to know?
You have to accept that you'll never be the same again. However, you can work around that. You can still, you can move forward. You can actually eventually, although at the time you just feel like you've been chewed up and spat out, that you can move forward. That it's important to keep yourself. That's not really a good way of saying it, but
no, I think that is. Yeah, to not lose track of who.
Do not lose yourself. Yeah. And that's hard. That's actually hard to keep being yourself. I'm not really good at describing these things. But to actually, to hold on to yourself, if you like, so that you don't lose what you are and what you were before you had children, before you had relationships, before everything else. But that person, that core, that little seed, that is still you. You have to hold on to that,
Yeah, I think it's very easy to get eaten up by guilt, by anger, and to become, I guess, bitter or resentful or something, to allow those negative emotions to overtake. But as Belinda said, it's very important to, allow yourself to feel those things, but to keep being yourself and to know that you will come out of it. However long it takes, whether it takes 6 months or 10 years or 20 years, you will survive it. It can feel like you won't a lot of the time, but you can get through it. I found keeping a journal for me was really important. It really allowed me to express things which I couldn't to anybody in my life. I could put it down on paper and almost like letters to Richard. And that helped me hugely.
Yeah. You write a journal, don't you?
Yeah.
That you've done it ever since. I'm too disorganised to write a journal. I suppose because I spend a lot of time alone. I'm on my own a lot of the time, and so I have a lot of time for reflection and to actually think about these things. And for me, that's how I deal with it, and to be outside and be in nature, all the things we say to people: go for a walk, go out, walk your dog, spend time with your animals, all those things for me are what works for me. But I'm not a big journal writer. I do try, and then I'll do it for 2 days, and I think, sorry, I can't be asked.
I do. I mean, my journal is writing to Hector, but usually about all of the crap bits that have gone wrong and things, that I'm struggling with, in my day job, etc., and life. I think the important for me, I needed to know that it was possible. So I needed to know that it was, that I had hope, that I could move forward, and that is what I found from Claire Milford Haven and Hamish and Dave and all of the people that I got to know. And I think that is why I'm passionate about what we do at Hector's House, in that we can provide the empathy to sit with someone who has experienced what we have, and we don't need to say anything because they know that we know. And the important thing is to know that what grief is, that it's relentless, it's tiring, it's shit. No one should go through it, particularly when it's a child. And that whether you believe in the 5 or 7 stages of grief, that there are these things. And to know that, and to know that all of those things you're feeling are real and valid, and that it hurts. And what I think people truly need is to be heard. They need to express, they need to go through it, they need to tell you stuff that they really need to tell you, and that people will understand. Because as humans, that's what we have to do. We can't do it alone.
But I think you also it's also important to say to people, you will smile again, you will be happy again, you will find that thing,
it's possible.
You felt that you'd lost. But you have to take time. And it takes time to go through all of that. But you will smile again, you will be happy again, you will enjoy things again if you allow yourself to. But you have to give yourself permission. Hector gave me permission, I feel. He felt that he was being miserable and having a sad time. So I've gone all out to make sure that we don't have that sad time, that we try to do that. I have a friend who lost her son quite a few years ago, and she is still trapped. She's still trapped in that sadness, that misery, that loss of friends, because she was probably not a very nice person to be around at the time, etc., etc., etc. We have tried not to be that, to not be those people that drag you down, that make you feel miserable, because what happens is people are just pushed away from you. They're not drawn to you because they feel that you are just going to drag them down. Do you know what I mean?
Which is why some people need support, and they don't know that they need support, and they're not going to reach out for support because they need to process. Basically, Susan would know more about this, but people need to process it. They need to go through that process. And you can't, it's so hard to do it on your own unless you have such great self-awareness. And therefore, if someone is still trapped in it, they need to see someone, and they need to have that help from a therapist and a counsellor to take them through all the stages, I think. Susan, what do you think?
Yeah, I think for me personally, I'm a counsellor myself, that therapy, really was the right thing for me. But it's such a unique experience, and we're all different in how we manage things. There's no right or wrong way, I believe. The important thing is, I know I pushed people away in my life because of my repressed anger and I've lost people in my life because of that, but I have come through it, and I've got self-awareness over it, and I have got people who have stuck by me regardless, and you know, and I generally feel like I've found myself again, you know, and that's why I believe it's possible for everyone to do that.
I'm a big believer that people can change when they want to. I think that applies for pretty much any aspect of your life. Once you make a decision that's for yourself, it's not because of any external pressure. I think anyone is capable of anything. If you've for whatever reason you've come to the place where you can begin to give yourself the freedom and the time and the love and the empathy and all those things that you need to begin to heal yourself, I think people are perfectly capable of actually healing themselves and becoming happier again and finding joy and purpose and love and all of those things that make being alive worthwhile. I think those things are still there. You just have to be in a place where you can see them again. And I think it's like you said before, it's a time game. And for some people, it's quicker than others. But I think it's when you make the decision for yourself, I think it's perfectly possible. I know we haven't got too much time left for today. So just before we kind of wrap up, I just wanted to ask, in your day-to-day lives now, you know, how do you sort of feel day to day?
Most of the time I feel great. Probably the pills. I do take sertraline. I have to say I do, and I will continue to take it, because I feel that in actual fact, since I've been taking it, I've been more balanced than I was ever before in my life. So that's a good thing for me. I enjoy every day. Yeah, even when the sun's not shining.
I try to find something to be grateful for every day. I'm grateful for my other 3 children. I've now got a grandson as well. And it's finding that joy in every day. And there are times when it does overwhelm you again, the grief, and it's accepting that and riding the wave and coming out the other side and finding some direction, some focus. Yeah, so Hector's house gives me that, you know, gives me that meaning in my life. So I generally, I'm pretty good now. Yeah, I say I'm found myself again.
It's good.
Amazing. It's wonderful. But I manage it. So I will, if I wanted to go down a hole and decided that's what I was going to do, I could perfectly well go down a hole. But I, like Susan mentioned and Belinda, I try and find things that I'm grateful for. I do the things I need to do to keep me well. That includes, if I can, getting to exercise, trying not to drink too much, trying to do all those conscious things that we talk about, because it is a matter of managing it, because there are times when I can become overwhelmed as well, and then I allow myself to for a period of time, and then I go, okay, let's get on. And that's the difference between now and however many years ago, where I couldn't do that. I couldn't pick myself up and go, come on, let's look for gratitude, let's do things, and so that's where I am now. And I think from my point of view, it will be a constant management. The management becomes easier. So there was a time when it was so hard I couldn't manage it whereas now I can manage it with ease, but I'm aware that I need to.
It is about managing it.
Yeah. But it's amazing to know that now, compared to where you've been sort of in your lives with your personal well-being, it's amazing to see where you guys are now, but obviously I didn't know you guys when you were in the midst of all this stuff, but to know you as I know you now, it's amazing. And you're all, really wonderful, bright kind of people, for lack of a better term. And I know that the only reason you're able to be those bright people is because you've put the work in and you found the things that allow you to do that, and that have allowed you to become kind of the people you were before to some degree, but also just a different thing, because it's a constant process of evolution. But yeah, it's amazing to see you guys. And, you know, Rob and I, we talk all the time, and we have very different lives, and we're interested in very different things, but there's a huge overlap when it comes to everything to do with, you know, what makes being alive pretty great, really. And it's, you know, you have good days, you have bad days, we all do, everyone does. But I think, yeah, to see you guys now and to see you be able to, in the midst of quite a heavy conversation, still have little things that you can chuckle about and smile about. And it's, you know, you're in such a different place with your relationship to grief. And it's really amazing to see. So thank you so much for taking some time to talk about all this stuff today, because I know it can be quite a difficult topic. Depending on where you are on the day, obviously it can be harder than other days. But yeah, thank you for your time.
I think I've said everything I need to say. Probably more than I should have. Too much.
No such thing. It's good. It's good to just talk.
It's also good because everyone hears from me all the time, and it's really nice for you to have to be saying things as well, I think. And for Susan, it's wonderful, and thank you so much for sharing.
Yeah.
Because, you know, and that's
amazing.
Thank you very much. Amazing.
The thing is also really fascinating how different our experiences of it have been. You know, that's just blown me away, actually.
And
really
I think
fantastic,
that's
very interesting.
Good though, isn't it, for people to see you know, how different it can be. You know,
absolutely
how different our songs were.
Yeah, it's fascinating. Actually, it's been a really interesting conversation. Definitely.
Right. Thank you very much, and
I will see
you guys soon.
Bye.
Bye.